Welcome back, board members. We are moving right along today, recognizing that these meetings will fill up as we start implementing the legislative requirements that have come before us. But we will take advantage of this month anyway. So we are on agenda item 11. This is the general legislative session preparation. We have with us Elise Newey and you've got one backup. They're gonna drizzle in here, I imagine. So, and then we've got the majority of board members here. How many do I have here? I've got 11 board members, minus one, but he'll be back. Okay, okay. So let's go ahead, Elise, if you want to go ahead and begin on agenda item 11.
All right, thank you. Elise Newey, Deputy Superintendent of Policy. We're just as a heads up, so the legislation session ended on Friday. We've all been recovering since then, and so we don't have a lot of our details. However, over the next month, I'm going to show you a little bit about our process and what we do after the legislative session, so that you're aware of all of the different aspects that go into the implementation process. And then in April, we'll have a much more robust discussion about some of the numbers and things that have passed and not passed and all of that. So if I can get sharing rights, is that Kelsey? Sorry. I will bring up my screen. Okay. So just as a couple of really high level numbers, we had 210 bills that were introduced that we were tracking. So there was actually over 1,000 bills total this year, but of those, only about 210 impacted education generally. So this is anything having to do with building codes, school nutrition, federal programs, anything that could touch education, and any of the things that you do, we track. Of the 210, 105 bills passed. And this is really exciting because that's a perfect 50% bill passage rate, and that's exciting. So you can report that to all your constituents. A couple of high level just bills to touch on that we wanted to talk about. The first was SB 34. So if you remember back in October, November, we were working on legislative requests from you all and things that staff and you all wanted changed in law. Those are all subject to whether or not a legislator is willing to put them in a bill, and then from there, whether or not the bill passes. So we're going to highlight some of the successes. So things that actually made it from your request all the way to the end. And SB 34 held a lot of those. So that was run by Senator Johnson. You'll see that it replaced district with LEA to ensure that charter schools are included in the reintegration plans and those requirements in law. That was just an oversight from years past. Also some flexibility on the suicide prevention funds. There was a lot of conversation about that this year. It did not actually change the amount of funding that was given. It just makes it so that USBE is not responsible for ensuring that all of the funds are, because it required that $1,000 be sent to each school. And if the legislature were ever to not fund that appropriately, we would be on the hook for compliance to ensure that they got $1,000. So this helps kind of give us coverage that if there's ever a year where we don't get those funds, we can send out all that is available and not be on the hook for compliance. And then it also shifted the safety assessment responsibility for USDB from the local security chiefs. Remember, every school has to do their safety assessment with their local personnel. However, USDB is a little bit unique, as you all know. And so that the new person responsible for that is the state safety chief or his delegate. So that way you only have one person working with all of the different USDB campuses rather than these kind of disparate conversations happening in various locations. A couple other successes. We had HB 144. Paula Plant worked tirelessly with Representative Tracy Miller, who also worked really hard to make updates to the school community council laws. A lot of those got through and were changed successfully. Also, HB 312. This was not one. We asked a little bit for some updates to Representative Welton's civics requirement. As if you recall, last year he passed a bill where a new course was required in high school, and there had been some back and forth. You all passed that rule probably 3 times in the last year trying to get it right. And in the end, we went back to him and said, hey, it would really help if you changed the code to say XYZ. And he did do that. He was so wonderful to work with. And then Representative Auxier worked with him to combine some of their bills together into HB 312. So that's really exciting. That also repealed the early learning plan and the early math plan. That was another legislative request from you all, and that significantly reduces reporting burdens for our LEAs. So that is huge. We're excited about that. 2 more.
Can we have
yeah.
I think we have a question on,
Sure.
is it on that? Was she just, yeah. This is, there were 2 312s, right? SB and HB. Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
That was just for clarify. I was going to ask the same thing. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, there was a Senate SB 312 from Johnson that impacted UPAC. That was another one. HB 448 was a bill run by Representative White based on the recommendations that came out of our USDB working group and our committees. So that was hugely helpful. He was very gracious in taking our recommendations. And so that was a great one to see pass. And then SB 181, this is another legislative request that you all had. This is based on some legislation run last year by Senator Escamilla that dictated some new requirements for seclusion and seclusion rooms. Again, we went to pass the rule and we passed the rule, but found that there were some things in code that were a little bit confusing or could be more clear. And so we've been working with her since then. And she is also incredibly wonderful to work with and has been just so collaborative, and we're grateful for that. So that leads us into the implementation. If you recall, this is our favorite cycle. We've just come out of the legislative session and now we're in the implementation phase, and we will be working toward legislative preparation for next year here in the next couple of months. But implementation entails a lot of communication with our LEA, so making sure that they are clear about what the expectations are and the new laws. We write a lot of rules. We will see things pick back up next month. We've already got 10 rules ready to go for April. Then there's program implementation, anything that changes our programs or requires us to create a new program like the Gold Medal Schools program. We will be creating that and getting that going. And then lots of interim committee reports. A lot of legislation is passed with a requirement that we report to the Education Interim Committee on how the program's going. Similar to that report that I showed you earlier with the Partnerships for Student Success. That's an example of one of those reports that we submit to the interim committee. I'll show you. In order to do this well, we create trackers because we love trackers. We do them all the time for everything. And this is all of the bills that passed and all the information about them. As we go along the side, we figure out who we need to contact, all the different requirements that are there, what rules we'll need to create, whether we need to hire an FTE. All of the different information is included in this tracker. So if you ever have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And again, in April, we'll have a lot more details about the requirements that came down from the session.
Okay, I've got a question from Member Brinton.
Thank you, Superintendent Nui, through the chair. Do we have access to that tracker? Because it is really hard to look at the complete list of 66 pages of bills. And then now that the session's over, just to be able to see what passed, what actually passed.
Yeah, we can. This one is shared with all of the staff and can get really messy, but I will get you a list of all the bills that passed. We are still actually waiting for the legislative website to finish updating, and we'll have a final count probably tomorrow afternoon.
Okay. That is, so that, I'm looking at the agenda items here. That's the legislative bill summary. Is that correct? I'm getting some kickback here. do on the legislative bill summary? Yeah, go ahead, Member Bogus.
So because I promised to ask, Deputy Superintendent Newey, SB, I believe it's 265. I've had about 5 different people call me on that, and so if we could maybe add that next month, or you and I could meet and work on that, that would be great. Okay.
Sorry, it's very slow. Is it this one that you're 295? 295. Okay. Yeah, we can discuss that in detail and what that looks like.
May I actually talk
Yep.
again? I don't
Member
know.
Bogus?
There's just a number of people that I think have erroneous conclusions drawn about this bill, but I don't want to respond in that manner without first consulting with you to make certain that my understanding is correct. So, yeah.
Okay. I don't see any other lights. Let's move. We're going to move backwards again to the legislative budget summary. Scott, if you will report on that, that'd be great.
Good. Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones. So if we could pull the backups, starting with what we call the index. Who's driving? Oh, is it? Okay, sorry. Just while she's pulling that up, we appreciate everyone's patience with, I mean, as we know, the session just ended last Friday, so it took us a while to meet with the LFA, get things consolidated. And in fact, Assistant Superintendent Jacobson is hunkered down in her office getting ready to get the budget set, so we can put it in front of Finance Committee in April for your review. But I think the key takeaways, and I think probably Deputy Newey already brought this up, is that first of all, the legislature did support your number one priority and funded it. So, that's a key piece there. But what this does here is it provides a consolidated list of all of the different funding. This is the fiscal note one. Yeah, no, it's the other one. Yeah, that one. So this provides all of the funding activities. Now, I need to make sure that we're all clear that House Bill 1 is the base budget bill. And then within House Bill 1, because there's been some questions about items such as the athletic fields for rural school districts. Well, if you consult or if you see that the legislature passed laws that those are required to be put into the base budget until they're removed. So the $5 million you won't see on here because it was put into the base budget bill EAC met in December and put it in there. So for that particular question that has come up by more than one board member, and then from the field even to me too, is, hey, where is this? Well, the $5 million that was last year is in the base budget bill. So these items right here are funding items that occur as a combination of new money plus this year's exercise or whatever we're calling it on the reallocations of funding. The bottom line takeaway is the summation of it is that this resulted in roughly 110 million, I think it is at the bottom. Yeah. So if you could scroll down, of ongoing money, and then the amount that you see there is the summation of one-time money. What we'll do though, like to Dr. Newey's point, is when we put together the book, it will capture all of this in one place for you, right? Because we just we're barely not even a week out of the end of the session. So we take all of this information and consolidate it into the legislative summary book. So this will become even clearer to you as we move together into the spring and in the budget setting process, not only by you as the board, but by your local education agencies to capture all of these different moves. So I'd just like to pause here. I recognize that this was posted maybe just a couple of days ago. So, but even following this meeting, I'm always available for you to contact and ask questions, right? And if you have concerns, you can text me. I'll try to answer you as quickly as possible. So subject to your guidance or directions, or I'll just pause here. So.
Thank you. I've got Member Earl and then Vice Chair Wood with some questions.
So my question is, and you probably already answered this, and my apologies if
No,
I
no, it's
missed
okay.
it. So it's looking at the chart, when it says the 300 in red, and that's that adult education,
Uh-huh.
that means what?
Well, so not
It's
only
taken away
no,
this.
that's a great question.
Okay.
So, Chair, what board members and the public need to look at is, and we can explain this, and I had articulated this in the weekly meetings, is you have to look at, was it a complete elimination of the program?
Or reduction.
Was it a reduction to the overall base amount to the program? That's what we have to do on the one eaches. And I know that's very cumbersome, but in the case of the adult education one, with that reduction, it's only a portion of the reduction to that program. But then when you look at digital teaching learning, just as an example,
So
with-
red means minus.
an offset, a reduction, or a
that's all I needed to
yeah,
know. But
okay,
you can keep
okay.
it. If
Right,
you
but-
want to, I just wanted to make sure that I understood
Yes,
it as
you
taken
do
away, but I
understand
wanted
it.
to make sure that.
Yeah,
okay,
but
that's-
then I would ask that we also expand on the reason why, or that it may have been a full elimination of the program by reduction. The best example of that is the digital teaching and learning program that you also see in here in the red, tens of millions there. So, but yes, that's correct.
So then the question becomes, why does the home hold harmless a one time?
It's one time. Yeah, it was moved over. Yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so you see the reduction in the ongoing, and it got moved over into the one time. Great catch. Yes. So,
Okay. And Vice Chair Woods says that her question was answered. And then
okay.
I think that's it then. Let me,
Well, for this, if I may, then
for
I can proceed
questions,
back.
I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry, sir.
No, I
Yeah,
think that's
go
it for
ahead.
questions.
Yes,
Please
sir.
proceed.
Okay, so now if we could pull up, board members and the public are very interested in the fiscal note process. So when we, you heard from Deputy Newey how many bills there were. Well, with bills come fiscal impact. So there's the term fiscal impact and then fiscal note. So we as an agency are asked to identify what fiscal impacts would take place as a result, or we estimate could take place as a result of legislation. And so then, and I believe Director Yuri's here so he can help answer questions, because the team did a very good job of keeping up and responding. What the key takeaway from this, though, is there's been a lot of concerns over the years about, well, are staff submitting, the impact to this would we need 3 FTEs, or we need, X amount of dollars to buy software, or we really try to pull that or generate that out as part of the response to the fiscal note. In a separate document that's not in here, because it only came available as part of our inventory and our process of getting ready to set the budget, is we can demonstrate to you and the public where we had submitted for a fiscal impact, but then subsequently that impact didn't make it into the end product, which is a fiscal note to the bill. Now, I want to be very clear that I don't think this is a result of anything but trying to ensure that the budget balances, right? That they're trying to say this, but it doesn't take away or mitigate away from the thoughts of, well, here we have this mandate or we have this requirement now, but no FTE to do it. So the process is a good process where we can try to identify it, but we don't control whether or not we ultimately receive the amount of funding we put as the impact and or the FTE as an example. Later on, as we get into the budget setting process, we will demonstrate to you which bills we had put a fiscal impact in along the lines of FTEs, and which one of those. It's only a handful, but still we had made requests of those. I've shared some of that initial information with a couple of board members, but I'll email it to all of you ahead of the April meeting and the budget setting process that we start with Finance Committee under Board Member Davis's direction in the April Finance Committee meeting. Too. So the crosswalk with the fiscal notes, I know, is very busy. There's a lot of information in there. What we ask is to review it, to do it, and then come back to us with questions so that we can flesh all of this out as part of the end state, which is a budget setting process by you. And when I say that, you don't set LEA budgets, they set their own budgets and then report what their boards ratified. You are adopting, and we use that term separate from approving what the legislature, you're adopting what the legislature provided to us so that they can subsequently do their part, they being LEAs, to meet the code and the responsibilities they have to set their own individual budgets and then report those back to us, all within appropriations, all within the larger appropriation piece. Chair, subject to any questions or concerns with fiscal impact, fiscal note processes, any particular items in there, that concludes this portion. And more details, it'll all come together in the book, in the summaries. So.
Okay. I've got a couple of questions from, or a couple of lights anyway. One from, we'll first go to Member Lear, then to Member Davis.
And I don't know if I've just paid more attention this year, if it just seems more obvious, but I have a few questions about these fiscal notes, especially as they relate to FTEs. How often, and I don't expect you to count the bills and give me an exact percentage. I know that's going to be hard for you to not do that, but how often among all of the bills that you do fiscal notes on, how often are the FTEs stripped out?
Yeah, I think we have that, right? Yeah, we have that actually. So
I saw the ones that if those are the only ones, I saw those 6.
No, we can do it. Yeah, we can pull it up. Yeah. So, but I think, Chair, what she's asking is each year, right? Like
right. From year to year.
Quite often they are. But then, to be fair, in the past, when the board has made requests for additional FTEs, we've received at least partial funding towards those. If you recall, you had identified a need for critical FTEs. PEA had recommended, of the 1 million plus that we had requested, PEA had recommended to EAC $700,000 for those specific FTEs, but then EAC did not take that recommendation. So then what you're seeing here is what we've initially put together. This is in draft form because, again, we're only 6 days past it. So we really do, your staff does an excellent job of going bill, by line, by line, by line. But it does take more than 6 days to do this. But this is the initial results of where we had specifically identified FTEs based on the bills you see here and did not receive those this year. But overall, it happens quite often where we'll request an FTE. If you want me to put it in percentages.
That's all right, Scott. You've given me enough information. That's Scott.
60 to 70. Okay.
Enough
Okay.
information.
Yes.
But
Okay.
a couple more
I'm
pieces
just an information. Just yeah.
Have you, because this happens, and I feel like, and maybe I'm just not seeing the big picture as much as you are, but I feel like when this happens, we are set up, the board is set up to fail. Because we have said conservatively, I know we always are conservative because we don't get what we ask for conservatively. So there's no point in being exaggerating. So when we conservatively ask for FTEs to do what we're tasked with doing in a bill, and then we don't get it, I feel like we're set up to fail. I don't, and it's a lose-lose because if we suddenly can do it, then because we pull, we use an inept or inaccurate analogy, we pull the coins out of the couch cushions, or we pull employees out of the couch cushions or something, that then they say, oh well, look, you could have done it anyway. And if we certainly can't do what the bill directs us to do, that always brings about problems. So that's not an option either. So either way we lose. I'm just wondering if there's something we could do going forward. Have you and I realize the dust hasn't settled, but is there something we could do, the board could help you do as staff, or staff could say, what could we do to get those, to say, no, we really, really, really need these FTEs?
Chair, I think that it goes to what Superintendent Hart spoke to as part of her superintendent's report. We are in a phase now where we're going to really need to look at what what the staff are doing, restructuring and reorganizing so that she can make recommendations on how to meet all this. And it could be that she identifies not only do we need additional staff here, but these types of staff, like with these titles, these kind of expertise and things. So the short answer, because I know I'm a information kiosk, is that we need the board to listen to what Superintendent Hart makes as recommendations following or by way of her process that she's taking now. The legislature did give some flexibility to the superintendent to reallocate or move funding and move positions between particular line items, not all of them. There's still some restrictions there. But that's the first time I've seen a legislature open to, and even this legislature in the 12 years I've been here, to opening line items for a superintendent to have the flexibility to study and then make moves and recommendations on where we maximize FTE power to meet all these requirements, not just legislative, but yes, ma'am.
Appreciate that, and I noticed that, and I appreciate that. That's noteworthy. My concern with that is, and again, maybe I'm being too literal, but my concern is you can't take an IT person that we've decided we don't need and turn him into a legal investigator. And that, so does that mean firing staff? And those things give me pause also. Firing staff to hire another person. And I don't like that kind of, we already have a morale problem. And I don't think that's going to help. So I just hope we can give some thought of what we can do going forward to convince, and maybe it is, they're all about ROIs. And even if I'm not, that if we have to pretend we are, or pretend I am, then maybe that's what we'll need to do, because I think we need to have the people to do the jobs so that we can be successful. And that's, sorry, I've gone on long enough. Thank you.
Member Davis.
Yeah, that last chart that you just put up, Deputy Superintendent Jones, was really helpful. And I think another column that would be helpful is what was actually funded, or not funded, both for USBE and for what we suggested was needed at the LEA level for the LEA burden. Especially, we've got a meeting coming up with our Reports and Requirements Task Force and on Monday. And this is leading to my real question. Superintendent Hart and I, on assignment from that task force last year, met with some of the fiscal analysts and some of the legal drafters and requested that they include the local burden, even if it doesn't get funded, just so that the legislators and public can see what it was going to require on the local level to implement. And at one point, one of the supervisors for the LFAs said, this past year we had a bill that was required training we estimated would be about $12 million. It didn't get funded by the legislature. We should have written on the documents that it would cost $12 million in property taxes. He said, I haven't thought of that before. So I'm just wondering if, not right now, obviously, but if as you go back through and you're making the bill of bills or even looking at things for our meeting Monday, if you happen to have seen anything like that where the local burden was included or a property tax amount was estimated or included this year, could you let us know that also? Thank you. Or through the chair, if that's okay, that information would be helpful. Thank you.
Scott, yeah, will do is the response. Thank you. Okay. With that, Scott, does that conclude the legislative budget summary?
Yes, sir, with the caveat that more details are going to follow. So hopefully this is a value add to get you started in reviewing, and then as we go into the portion of the year where we start to set the budget, it inclines you to ask, more in-depth questions about the funding and where it's going. And I think we really appreciate your time and attention to this, but both you and the public. So thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, there is agenda item 11.3. This is a veto request consideration. I'm not sure if we have some member reel. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to make a motion that we request that the governor veto SB 312. And with a second, I can give you some reasons why I want that.
I'll second.
Okay, so the motion is to request to the governor a veto of SB 312. It's been seconded. Go ahead, member Reel.
Thank you. I was pretty disappointed, to say the least, in the process of how this bill came about. It narrowly, by one vote, passed in the Senate. And I thought that there was a true lack of collaboration. I felt like we could have done a better job of collaborating and working through some of the things that they were trying to solve with the bill. There was really no time in the rushing, and I know that's how the legislative session works, but there was no time to verify on some of the things that were presented, which was disappointing for me. And it felt like it was a law being created for an anecdotal experiences of a few teachers. And I don't like laws that are created that way. I don't like making laws based on experiences of a few. And I also know that we have an audit coming for UPAC, and I think that that could have been a really thoughtful way to start this process and then potentially lead to some legislation and code change rather than working the way that it did. And then lastly, it just felt like it was a little undermining of the UPAC because it allows educators back in the classroom that honestly pose reasonable risk. And I find that disappointing. And I'm actually surprised that a lot of folks were okay with it because I hear so often in my time on the state board and even in education for the last 20 years about, you know, this fear of some of these teachers and what they do. And this kind of allows these educators that have had wrongdoings to be back in the classroom. And then lastly, the last reason why I would like to request a veto is that AFT, USBA, and UEA all opposed to this bill. And that was really surprising for me because they are constantly looking for ways to support educators. And this, you know, generally when there's legislation that comes out that shows a way to give protections to educators, those groups are in favor of those laws, and they were all opposed to this. So those are my reasons why I think that it would be important for us to ask for a veto from the governor on SB 312. Thanks.
Member Bogus.
Thank you, sir. Through the chair, may I query the maker of the motion? Member Reel, a number of times you use the terminology kind of. Does it kind of do that or does it do it?
Member Reel, did you want to respond?
It's a sincere question. I'm just wondering if there's nuance or if it's a hard line.
I think that I kind of talk using the word kind of often, but it does that.
Okay, that's what I needed to hear. Thank you.
I apologize.
Member Davis. Okay, the next person is to vote. So let's, member, there we go. I've got member Lear, then member Carey.
I would, of course, I seconded this motion, and I agree with all Sarah's comments. One of my reservations about requesting this myself is that it became such a politically loaded issue, which was unfortunate too, because it could have been more factually discussed with data and information instead of both sides saying this always happens and the other side saying that never happens. And it became very political, and there were, as I understand it, some threats made, and that could have been going both ways. I don't know about that, but I think it was not a thoughtful way to come to some conclusions about people safe in classrooms and LEAs making some decisions and based on the school board's decisions. And so I think it's a tough one to vote for a veto. I understand that, but I really admire that Member Reel has decided to make this a public statement, because I absolutely believe it was not a thoughtful process. It was not a collaborative process. It was, my word would be, well, I won't use that word, but I think it was not something that invited discussion and analysis, and that was not data driven. And I think that's what the audit would bring about, and could make this possibly one of the changes that come about because of the audit, or at least a discussion, and not something that was done without a thorough collaboration with our education friends. So I support this, obviously.
Member Carey.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think that 312 sends a strong message and a very positive message that the legislature, the Senate, and the House, they respect the work of this board. They wanted to go much further, but when we said, look, we're looking at this, we're investigating this, and I think we can address a lot of this in board rule, they respected that position. And you know, I was there when Senator Reeby said, you know, yeah, UPAC has some problems, and there's some things we can fix. In the end, she voted against the bill, but all the other members of the Senate Ed Committee said, yeah, there's something wrong. Huh? Hinkins? Okay. But it passed, and I'm grateful that it did, because we do have an opportunity to protect educators and teachers. And our UPAC system, its purpose is to protect our students, but we owe our educators in that process tremendous due process. That's devoid. Several members of this body testified against 312, and they were passionate, and the same concerns that you hear that were raised today were raised before the Senate, were raised before the House, and were raised before the full body. Some in a public setting, most of it behind the scenes. But even after weighing all that information and having all these stakeholders weigh in, the legislature agreed to move forward, recognizing that some of this simply could not wait. And that's what we are seeing in SB 312. I would speak in opposition to the request. Thank you, Chair.
Next, we've got Member Booth.
I've spent a lot of time on this particular bill. Talked with Welton, who was the co-sponsor from the House. Talked with other legislators. I've listened carefully to all of the committees' deliberations, and I was just confused, for example, by Board Member Carey's statement in the Senate Education Committee, because last month in our meetings here, Board Member Carey was very clear that he felt that we needed to not be making quick decisions, but that we needed data, we needed information. I've been so happy that there is an audit and there is a careful study being implemented at the present time to gather information from many stakeholders that are impacted. But I didn't hear that same message from Board Member Carey when I listened to the Senate Education Committee presentation that he made. And it seemed like we've got to hurry. We need to do this right now. And I wondered why, since we are gathering information so that we can make important decisions. Right next to, well, one person away from Board Member Carey was Jennifer Partridge. who, as the president-elect of USBA, reported that through their deliberations of many hours and many meetings with JLC and with USBA Board of Directors, that they voted unanimously against moving this forward in hopes that the new information gathered through the audit would help us make the best decisions so that it's not something we have to just change again as soon as we get all of the correct information. I'm interested in what are the critical timeline issues that made those who were in support of this feel that it needed to be done immediately. And I recognize the political, we have a certain amount of political capital here. And as does the governor, as he's determining what he would do. I had, after major consideration and in and out and many conversations, decided that today I would not, even though I was planning to do what Board Member Reel just did in making this motion. Because I'm concerned that we don't want to lose our voice at the table, but I also want to be wise, and I want to follow what Board Member Carey said last month in terms of let's not hurry and make a decision without the information that we need. And I'm eager, especially when all of the educator, administrators, and board members across the state unanimously agreed that we should wait until we have more information so that we can make the best decisions regarding this. And then when it was unfunded in terms of needing an FTE to write, there's a number of things I could go on and on. I won't, sorry. But I'm just eager to have us be united in basing our decisions on the best information available and carefully measuring if the timing that sometimes the legislative session or the agenda of what we've got to get accomplished before 2:45 a.m. in the morning when we have those long meetings, that we just stop and say, okay, we'll wait until we have the correct information and all the information. I know there's a lot of public interest, a lot of support from organizations and individuals who are wanting what's best for education, for public education, for students, for educators. I just want to listen to all of the people for whom we have responsibility and whom we have the privilege of representing before we jump to make decisions that are not possibly fully baked and fully ready to have the most positive impact on public education, students, and faculty. Thank you.
I've got three in front of you.
But I was addressed by name in those comments.
I don't mind. But remember Bogus, Earl, and you guys good? I'm happy to wait. I'd love to. Okay. Bollinger? Okay. Chair, or
Thank
Member
you.
Carey, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think Board Member Booth brings up some good points, but we've been waiting for 15 years for these changes. And even today, we voted to approve, I think, 3 audits. And the one that comes to mind is the one that said we're going to look into travel, we're going to look into memberships, and we're going to look into conferences. And I said, because this audit is going to take place and because this audit will be pending, are we as an organization going to say, in the meantime, you can't join A, B, or C group? You can't go on this conference. You can't take this trip. And the answer was no. All those things are going to continue during the pendency of this audit. And I look at it this way very, very similarly, that yes, we are going to make huge changes starting with Rule 322 next month. our code of conduct for educators, and then we are going to come out with regular proposals to amend our UPAC rules. I think that's good, but I don't think we slam on the brakes and say, wait, the due process of our educators, that can wait. Well, it can't wait for those educators who are continuing to go through this process, a process that I believe is deeply flawed, that is stripping people of their livelihood, when we have something that we can do. The legislator intentionally acted in a very small way. They changed what had to be changed in statute to allow this body to move forward and make changes in rule. That's what they limited themselves to. And if they wanted to take a bigger paintbrush to that mosaic, they could have. But they didn't. They said, we'll make this change because we need to, and afford us that opportunity. So I respect the action that the legislature took. It acted in a very small way. The amount of people that it will impact, I forget the numbers that they were talking about in committee, but it was relatively small given the way the law was structured. But the message that it sent was, UPAC belongs in the hands of the elected board. And I really appreciate that message. And I think that by voting against this particular motion, we're also saying that, we've punted on our UPAC oversight for over a decade. This allows us to come back and say, this board needs to be taking a more proactive role, protecting teachers and making sure that they have the due process that they are entitled to. Thank you, Chair.
Member Bogus?
Well, my question is, so we've got this thing in here that says technical violation. I don't recall this board ever taking action in terms of revocation on a technical violation. That's not something I've ever heard of or seen in my time here or in the time that I stalked the board previous to my election. Is there someone that could answer whether or not we've ever revoked a license on a technical violation?
Ben, casually standing in the doorway, if you have a response to that question. Do you need that repeated? I know you were traveling. I'm not sure. Okay.
Ben Rasmussen, Director of Law and Professional Practices. The items that are listed as technical violations in the bill are items that would generally lead to a letter of warning from the board if you look at the presumptions. Looking at those items, I can't think of any that have led to a suspension. No.
You have a follow-up?
Actually, I can follow up after.
Okay. Well, follow up after. I would do it now because this is your second time speaking to this, and
To this?
well, yeah, I've got you down twice.
I don't think so.
I wrote it down wrong then. Go ahead.
All right. So then my next question would be, let's say, sorry, Director Rasmussen, you don't get out that easy. Let's say, for example, that these, we'll put it in quotes, technical violations that, let's say one of them happened to result in a revocation or a suspension. Under what circumstances would it be appropriate to promote that person into a different place and out of the classroom?
Ben, go ahead. Let me get there you go.
I mean, I think that's a policy call for the board and the legislature. That's not something that I can answer as staff.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I've got, next I've got Member Earl.
Yeah, I'm going to make a substitute motion that we postpone indefinitely this vote.
Yeah, it's not the same. Sorry, I'm just trying to think. I think it's in order. So the substitute motion is is not to remove, that would be not to undo, that would be out of order, but to postpone this item indefinitely. We've got a second. Back to you to speak to it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you a couple of reasons why. And after listening to I listened to the comments in committee, talked to some legislators. I too had some concerns on the language. I don't think it opens the door, swinging it wide when you talk about some of the provisions here with the technical violations. There's only a handful of individuals that I think this would even apply to. It doesn't start until May 6th, which gives us almost a year to look at whether or not it's how that applies. In other words, this is where I had confusion, because in committee it sounded like people were saying, oh, this will be retro, this will be retro. But the language with the amendments, and that's where I had some concerns, is it wasn't retroactive. It's starting with those that are cases that are open. This allows us to look and create provisions around that. I don't think it opens a door as wide as people are thinking. At first I had concerns because I wasn't sure where that landed based on the comments that were being made in these committees. But the language is not that. And after talking to the legislators, a number of legislators, about how they were interpreting this, I guess I interpret it different. So I'm not, whatever the governor does, I mean, he can gather his information. I'm not sure I'm ready to say, yeah, this won't benefit anyone, because I think there are some people that would benefit. Do I think a lot of people qualify? I don't think so, because the language technical violations, as was stated, and that's where I was having some concerns too. It's things like documentation errors or miscommunication. But in our rules, the presumptions aren't miscommunication on most of these. They're I can't even remember the language right offhand, but it's intentionality, and whatever the language is. That's what I had to go compare those two, because I was like, wait a minute, how many people would really even qualify under this? So I guess that's where the question is for me, and that's why I'm like, I'm not sure. There may be people that could benefit from this. I'm not sure that. Anyway, that's where I'm at on this. I'm not ready to make a motion one way or the other on this. So.
Vice Chair Bollinger.
Thank you, Chair. I would actually speak against the to postpone indefinitely, because I do think this is something that is very relevant. And as I've had conversations with legislators that are in my area specifically and discussing this, I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about what this does and what this doesn't. I think you've spoken to that. And like Member Baga said, a lot of the things that are listed as technical violations are not what we suspend licenses for. If we look at the presumptions on R277215, it's things, if we exclude the sexual piece or the harm to children, it's things like convicted of theft or intentional misappropriation of public funds, intentionally misappropriating public funds. It's things like engages in multiple incidents or patterns of theft or misappropriation, attends a school activity where they're under the influence of alcohol or illegal drugs. It's things that we do not want those individuals back in our schools for. I wish that the way that the rule had been written was that they are not allowed to go back into the classroom or to volunteer or to work unless they have written expression, like permission from us, which would then allow us to have some leeway. And I think that was the intent of the bill, but that's not what it says. What this does now is it's going to cost us $165,000 in UPAC staffing. That's what our staff said that this would cost us. We know that UPAC is already understaffed. So this, in my mind, my concern is if we have to write a report for every single suspension, this now slows down our process, which we know is our number one concern with UPAC. So it doesn't solve an issue in the way that it's currently written. Had it been written appropriately and really addressed the presumptions as written and or address the concern, then I probably could definitely support this, because we definitely want to make sure we have due process. I think there's also a misunderstanding of the term volunteer in a school. So as a principal, when I had somebody that wanted to volunteer, we had a very specific process they had to go through. They had to do a background check. We had to run that through, where a volunteer, the definition of volunteer in a school setting is that they would have supervision of other people's children. This does not prevent a parent from going to being with their own child on a field trip or or in a class party. But the word term volunteer is supervising other people's children. So again, I think there's misunderstanding of what that would do or prevent people from doing if they were volunteering. There, some people have said, well, as a parent, you wouldn't be able to go and volunteer. Well, you wouldn't be able to supervise other people's children if you did these things, which we would take a teacher's license away from. The other piece is that if they're allowed to go and work in a position that doesn't require a license, well, they could go be a director or a principal of a charter school, because if a license is not required for that position. So we're saying you don't get to teach in a classroom, but now you can be a principal of a charter school. So I think there's a lot of unintended consequences with this. Again, I would say it doesn't match our presumptions. There's misunderstanding about the volunteer piece. And then the unfunded piece is really a big concern. I don't want us to slow down our UPAC. I would like to see this come back around with more data. I think that we're onto a direction that we could definitely consider. And I agree with Chair Carey that we do have some work to do. And I agree with Member Booth that we do need the data to make sure we do this right. And I know that sometimes when we do laws, we think, oh, it's at least we're doing something, but doing the wrong thing and the unintended consequences can often cause more problems than solutions. So I oppose this motion to postpone. Thank you.
Member Lear?
I know I've spoken before. I just had two more. I had two additional comments in light of what's been said. The technical and administrative violations, I don't believe are well defined in this bill. And I think that sometimes they're in the eye of the beholder. And in fact, I've had some attorneys say to me, well, we're certainly going to be working on our consent to discipline decrees to make sure they fit into that technical administrative area. What is a failure of an IEP to fidelity? Is that administrative? Is it technical? So we have some things that are not clearly defined. And then we've got a couple of, I won't say it that way. There are individuals who surrender their licenses for a number of things, mostly because they've just decided, I don't want this hassle and I don't want to teach anymore. Though that's a revocation. So that's never been investigated at all. Those people could then volunteer in a classroom, however it's defined, or be an administrator in positions that don't require licenses. So I think we have, my point being, the process was really not collaborative, I don't care about the message, I care about collaboration and all the stakeholders being involved, and that did not happen. It was unfortunate. And I think this does have some areas that will be problematic in their interpretation. So I don't support the motion to postpone. I don't think, there's no point in it if we postpone.
Member Davis?
It sounds like it may not pass, but I would support the motion to postpone because on the one hand, I think it's important to look at ways that some folks can go in and volunteer on what basis. I think some of the language that came out in the end on the bill creates more uncertainty than clarity, and that would be a reason not to have this go through until next year when some of that language can be tightened up. But I do understand the intent behind it, and and I am supportive of people in some circumstances who want to volunteer in classrooms and want to participate in some of those greater ways. So I'm really at a I mean, I think postponing has some merits, and that's just because either way you take a vote right now, I mean, it's problematic either way.
Okay. So the motion, we have a substitute motion before us. It is to postpone this motion, which is to veto, request a veto of SB 312. And the motion, again, is to postpone that motion indefinitely. Seeing no additional lights, let's go ahead and vote. right, that motion passes 9 in favor, 6 opposed. Those opposed being Member Lear, Member Green, Member Wood, Member Ballinger, Member Bogus, and Member Reel. Okay,